Namaste. As part of Sri Aurobindo's writings today, we are with Vedic and Philological Studies, which form part of collected works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 14. Now, Sri Aurobindo's writings on the Vedas span across quite a few volumes. Three volumes in which we find completely dedicated to the Vedas is one is volume 14, which is Vedic and Philological Studies. Then the second is volume 15, Secret of the Vedas. And then there is Hymns to the Mystic Fire. These three are completely dedicated to the writings from the Vedas. But apart from this, there are writings in Bengali which I found very, very useful. Like what is Veda, what is Vedanta, what is in the Puranas. So if somebody wants to understand that aspect, so we'll find it there. Then there are a number of letters where he speaks about Vedas, the quest of the Vedic rishis, which you find in letters on yoga. Then even in essays, we find some essays which are there, which refer to the Veda, the Vedantic knowledge, etc. And then in the Live Divine, something which I'm sure people would have noted, that at the beginning of each chapter, you see a quotation. Most of the quotations are from the Vedas, the Rig Veda, 90% of them. Some are from the Upanishad and odd from the Gita, but mainly from the Vedas. So the importance that Sri Aurobindo gave to the Veda. Now, why did he give this kind of importance to the Vedas? Well, the simplest answer is that it is one of the works of the Avatar to rescue the Vedas. In all the stories of the Avatar, you'll see right from the Matsya Avatar. When Matsya Avatar is asked, why have you come? And it says, Vedanu Dharte, for doing Uddhar of the Vedas, rescuing the Vedas. So the importance of the Vedas, because they form the bedrock of not just Indian civilization and Sanatan Dharma, but of Dharma in the world. What they contain are those fundamental truths which are unsurpassable in their, it's the last finding that one can ever have in terms of the going within and finding the ultimate source of all things. So it is there in the Vedas. But in terms of manifestation, there are always new things to find, which we find, improvisations in terms of outer expression in a culture, all that changes. But the fundamental findings, for instance, fundamental finding number one, that there is one stable reality behind this entire creation, is a fundamental finding. Then people approach in different ways and accordingly give different names. This is there in the Vedas but has been lost in sects, cults, religions which don't understand this truth. Then that human soul's journey in its upward ascension to its own home is as a battle. In that battle there are cosmic forces which help the gods and that which oppose the Asuras and the Rakshasas. And the final thing is that both of them ultimately help in the human ascension. So this is the ultimate truth that Sri Aurobindo reveals to us. So Vedas are basically a body of spiritual experiences. If you look at it like that, they are not like somebody sat and started writing a grantha. It is not a scholarly wisdom. It was not written in a scholarly way. They are called aparushe, meaning thereby there is no labor involved in it. So the rishis received truths from different levels. These different levels we say now, but that time whatever truths were revealed to them, they took it as their task to put it in the form of certain mantras. They sometimes would see the riches, sometimes they would see a truth and they would express it through the riches. And that's how the Vedic truths were embodied. But these riches for a long time were not written down. So this was another interesting part of the Vedas, but transmitted through an oral generation, through an oral medium. So there were people whose work was only to preserve the Vedas. So even now you will see that there are schools in which people come, they memorize the Vedas. So they memorize, people used to memorize. But in the process, yes, there had been number of slokas have been lost. You just can't help it. But still what has come itself is fantastic. So why they preserved it in this medium, one logic is that there were no paper available. Well, this is one part of it. But more importantly, because in the Vedic richas, it is not just the word but also the sound which is important. So how do you preserve the sound? The only way is through this medium of oral tradition. So they preserved the sound and the word, and it was transmitted. And it always contained two layers of meaning, one which was meant for the uninitiate, and the other which was meant for the initiate. So Vedas are a system of yoga, not a system actually, but finding somebody walked a certain way, had certain discoveries, and he expressed it in a certain way. So it was not like a codified, rigid system that all must follow this way. Different rishis went in their own way and they discovered. And as the mother says, these rishis were involutionary beings that come with this purpose. When, in the early humanity where this kind of logic, reason had not yet come, the typal age of mankind. So during the time, rishis came and they had a direct contact with truth. And therefore, what they revealed, they gave it to mankind. Subsequently, the ages will disclose its truth. So preserving the Vedas is not just preserving a body of spiritual literature, but it's more importantly, it is the Vedic riches were like the sounds and seeds which were thrown into this world at a very early stage of human development, which will grow into a tree. So it was from this point of view that we see that Sri Aurobindo enters into exploration of the Vedas. Many people erroneously believe that he read the Vedas and then he started writing the meaning. It's just the other way around. Sri Aurobindo himself describes when he was in Chandanagar, that's around 1910 early period, he would often see the gods come and writing in certain scripts. And some of them, the scripts which appeared in the etheric records, of which we have spoken in records of yoga, they would be in Sanskrit. Sometimes they would be in some other languages which no one knows. So all these scripts would appear, the riches will appear as records in the etheric space. And those things Sri Aurobindo would see the gods coming and through signs communicating to him. And that time Sri Aurobindo was not conversant with the Vedas in a detailed way. So Sri Aurobindo would say, when Motilal Roy would ask, what are you looking at? He would say the gods. So what about the gods? They are communicating to me something through the signs. And when he would ask that, what is it that they are communicating? He would say, this is what I am trying to decipher. So when he went to Pondicherry from 1910 to 1912, that is the time when he started a serious and systematic study of the Veda, because he found there a confirmation of some of the experiences that he was already having. So the Vedas confirmed the experiences that he was already having, and therefore he could crack the code which is there in the Vedas. The second thing is that the reason he took it up was because it was Sri Krishna's one of the Adesh that, were given to him was to reinterpret the Vedas in the light of the original Sanatana Dharma. Because over a period of time it had lost, we'll just come to that, but this means of reinterpreting it was given to him by none else but Sri Krishna. Sri Aurobindo says that he gave him a new Nirukt, so the grammar which was used at that point of time. So as we know that the Latin grammar is very different from English, though the origin is there. So same way the original Sanskrit, the Aryan speech, was different from what we understand today. So he gave him that original key, and based on that he had to reinterpret the Vedas. One of the things that we see in one of the writings in this very volume is that while India was undergoing that phase of slavery, so some brilliant people suggested that if you really want to enslave India, one is that you have to finish the education. Second is you have to make people feel that they are really inferior. And the brilliant suggestion that went across was that to make them feel inferior, you have to actually just translate the Vedas. This is how people thought. Why? Because they will see that, this is worship of cow, this is worship of water, this is worship of earth. So now we have developed so much, science has gone so much ahead. So they will lose faith in their own religion. And this is what we see happen for a long time. And Sri Aurobindo challenges this. So Vedas always contained that at least two, in fact 3 layers of meaning. So one was for the uninitiated, where images were taken from the outer life. Even in our own life it happens. We use images to describe, oh, he's so strong. So, so strong how, oh, like a lion among men. Now we don't have that analogy because we don't have lion among men. We have jackals and, But you see, many times in poetry it is described like a lion among men. When you describe Arjuna, when you describe Lord Rama, like a singer, this is a way of describing. Oh, his strength, he is immovable, dread like the mountains. What is it? It's an image. Oh, this fellow, he keeps on shifting like a chameleon. Not a good thing. Flows like a river. Oh, like the winds, storm. Oh, this fellow, when he comes, is like the storm coming, like the hurricane coming. Don't we use these images? So this so simple that, even in dreams we see those images. Even we use in science horsepower. So similarly in the Vedas we see a lot of images which are during that time contemporary. Now of course in experience one will have a change of images because new images have come with which we are familiar. That time the cow, the horse, now we hardly see horses, cows are still visible. So if somebody has to see power, probably one will not see horse, one is likely to see a rocket going into space because that is the idea of power now. So this is how the Vedic images were formed at both these levels. And Sri Aurobindo, because he had the experience, and more important, along with the experience, he was deeply into understanding of languages in philology. So that gave a double advantage. One, he had the experience, and then he had a deep understanding of language. He had already mastered, as we know, English, Greek, Latin, French. He has written poems in French, of course, Sanskrit, later on Bengali and Tamil. So in the study of the Vedas, Sri Aurobindo started taking an active interest because he was trying to see comparative philologies about the roots of language, where all there are commonalities. Like for instance, one common word I can say is stand. So stand is used for, when we stand. Stand is also something which can hold things, stand. And in Hindi the word is sthit. Now you see again it's something to do with sthit. You are standing at a place. So there are common roots which one can see in languages. So there were roots in Latin and Sanskrit and roots in Greek and Sanskrit, which he was comparing. And at that point of time, certain roots were missing, the links were missing. And guess where he found it? He found it in the pure original Tamil language. He found the missing roots. And therefore he saw the deep connection between Tamil and Sanskrit, and of course between Greek, Latin and the Sanskrit language, thereby taking us to a common origin of human speech, which describes a common human experience. So again in speech there are two aspects. Normally we nowadays think of meaning, word has a precise meaning. But this is much later that there is a fixed meaning. Before a fixed meaning, the words have a fluid meaning. Like when language is evolving. Nowadays we have these new words which have come up, which cool. Now what does cool mean? Now it doesn't mean that he is thanda. It doesn't mean. It may mean he's a cool guy, he is not affected by things. Many things it can mean. It's not there in the dictionary, but it can mean a few things based on the meaning we attribute to it. So this word is still in its fluid stage. So like that, there are words go through a period when they are very fluid. And later on, they develop a fixed meaning. Similarly, before the word, there is sound. So sound signifies something. Sound itself, a lot of communication we have is with sound, by stress on syllables. Poetry is all about that. How you stress on the syllables and thereby the meaning, even in normal communication, by the stress on sound, we change the meaning. Go. Go changes the entire sense. One is a permission. The second is saying, I'm fed up of you, you better go away. The same word is there, but the sound changes everything. So, and where do sounds come from? Is there a logic behind the sound? So, many people would say it's random. Human beings developed and they started bringing out sound. Now, Sri Aurobindo goes further behind the sound. So, where does sound originate from? So there are original vibrations. They want to use human instruments, develop the human instruments to express themselves. So this is the origin of sound. So that's why we can say that speech, its origin is in the heavens, but its expression is on earth. That's why the word vak, shabd are used at once for human speech as well as for the vibration which we find in the etheric space. If we go into Indian understanding of language, it's that there are four layers at which this original vibration expresses itself. Two are concealed: Pashyanti Vak and Paravak. Paravak, Pashyanti Vak. And then you have Madhyama and Vaikhari, which it has undergone several levels of distortion. So this original vibratory mode, it is building instruments to express it. That's why speech is such an important instrument. If you see in the spiritual literature, so much importance given to speech and so much importance given to thought. Thought is one form of speech. Precisely because it's, in a way, if we see from the development point of view, it is the special capacity given to human beings. The word. It has a power, and so much Mother and Sri Aurobindo has spoken about it. But that's a different subject altogether. So all this we find Sri Aurobindo in a great detail. It is there in Secret of the Vedas also, but there is one particular aspect which is there in this book, which makes it really unique. Otherwise, most of the writings in this book are either drafts or incomplete writings. Of course, even incomplete writings of Sri Aurobindo are a delight. But the thing is that what you find here is also you will find in Secret of the Vedas. Normally, usually an upgraded version of the whole thing. So, but it's okay. It's beautiful to read it. For me, the Secret of the Vedas and the Synthesis of Yoga were the first books that came to my hand. And while Synthesis of Yoga was giving me a lot of experiences, the Secret of the Vedas was giving me aha feeling. Because till then I had Vedas in my house, Upanishad, the Gita, and I said, like everybody, I said, it's okay, but what's the big deal about these books? Because the translations were like that, no? So I said, theek hai. Then I even tried to read Satyarth Prakash. So first time you see an intellectual interpretation of the Vedas, which Swami Dayanand Saraswati tried. So, but it appeared like almost taking me towards a very impersonal kind of God, So I didn't really appreciate. I said, this is too much of an abstraction. So, but then when I read Secret of the Vedas, it was like, aha, it's such a delight. Because suddenly I discovered, oh, this means this means this. I started writing, go means this, Asha means this. Just so fascinated, like a little baby. So here we have, of course, that is for the next volume. But here you have basically 5 portions. One is essays in Vedic interpretation. These are mainly incomplete essays written between 1912 and 1914. So as I said, I don't know why they are part of it, but it's okay. I mean, it's because most of the material you will find in Secret of the Vedas. So these were probably regarded as drafts for Secret of the Vedas according to the editors. We don't know. But from 1914 onwards, because now it was the mother asking him to write, we see a totally different, the same writing. We see a very different impact that comes through the pages of the Arya. Then part 2 is selected Vedic hymns. So these are translations of Vedic hymns to gods other than Agni. But there are a number of other hymns translated which we find in Secret of the Vedas, and at one point, and hymns to the mystic fire which contains the entire Agni Sutras. And Sri Aurobindo at one point of time wanted the entire Rig Veda to be translated. That was the importance he gave to it. But he didn't have the time, especially during the Arya, First World War broke out. So he had to discontinue. And people asked him that, sir, why have you discontinued? He says, the whole world is boiling right now. So he had to discontinue it because the whole focus was on something else. And the writings took life divine and human cycle. They were the priority at that point of time. So these are wonderful hymns. When we read the hymns to the mystic fire, we'll see some of them. Part 3, commentaries and annotated translations on non-Agni hymns. And then there are Vedic notes which have been found in here and there. And part 5 is essays and notes on philology. And there was a draft for a work called The Origin of Aryan Speech. This is a wonderful essay, though again you will find it in Secret of the Vedas. So still one can read both for the joy of reading. So when we go through this wonderful book, so Sri Aurobindo explains that why this is important and how the European scholarship, we often hear about Max Muller, and we are very happy that he was a German who came and learned Sanskrit. But when you read through, both Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo did not appreciate his translations. Must say that. So while we may be happy, but many of his translations didn't make sense. If you use that kind of grammar, then for instance, I'll just give one instance. He would say that horses with their feet dripped in ghritam, ghee. What does it mean actually? Why would somebody put ghee on the foot of the horse? And what kind of a religion or spirituality can you come out of it? But when you understand the horse is the power and gritashnu, they're dripping with illumined knowledge, that's what gritam means, then it means a very different sense altogether. So the translations, if you just see Max Muller translation, they are very uneven. Some places you will feel that yes, there is something great in it, but otherwise you will feel these are all animal sacrifice, and these are hymns of a very early primitive humanity which was worshipping nature. That's how people have. This was, I don't say that Max Muller did it deliberately, but there were people who were out to destroy the, dharmasya glani, that there is no civilization like India, and we have to make it civilized. Now just imagine if India went that way. There are countries which completely took the Western color and they changed. You see, many of the countries, either there was an Islamic invasion, they became Islamicized, or they became Anglicized. You see, this is a fact of, history. But India not only resisted, absorbed, integrated, which is an amazing, when we look at history, it's one of the most amazing things that ever happened. How could it do it? So one of the main heroes behind it is Sri Aurobindo. Because he made the Indian people realize that no, don't go by what the European scholars are saying. And for that, what he did was, it was not only European scholars, even Sayana, because he uses again the old method, and he was not a yogi. So he used grammar. And as I said, it's not just about grammar, it were deep spiritual experiences. And that Sri Aurobindo brings into this entire range of Vedic writings, that they are very profound spiritual experiences which he encountered during the course of his yoga, and which all of us can encounter. For instance, let me just read one of them. So there is interesting colloquy in the Vedas on Agastya and Indra. So often when you see in Puranas, you see Indra suddenly his Singhasan begins to dolo for whatever reason. And he starts sending the rishis back to earth. Now, I have spoken about it elsewhere. But here there is a colloquy between Agastya and Indra. So Agastya, at a stage of his tapasya, finds that Indra is not giving him the way. So Agastya tells Indra, why are you doing this to me? I am taking the straight path of ascension. So why are you blocking my way? Why don't you allow me to go? Why is it that, the Maruts, they are your brothers. Why are you fighting with them? Maruts are those thought currents. Why are you blocking them? Why don't you allow them to freely expand? And then Indra says, well, you are wanting to do the ascension, but still what has been poured into you, it is also going into certain activities which are like ego bound. You're not yet completely freed from it. And till that happens, I will not allow you to ascend. So he gives a hint to Agastya. Now this is so true in our own, when we move into the yogic processes, then we discover initially it's all so easy. But as we advance more and more, and Sri Aurobindo would say very beautifully that, when you are going on the scooter very slow, then it's okay even if you come across things you can navigate. But if you are going fast, a pebble is enough to throw you off gear. So as we pick up speed in the yoga, as we begin to ascend, you see when a aircraft is ascending high, such a wonderful machine moving at greater than the speed of sound, one bird has to hit it and it comes crashing down. So as we fly higher and higher, of course, there is a grace element. That's why he knew that this yoga is. So in the colloquy between Agastya and Indra, which is one of the well-known colloquies, but if you read it, the way it is described in the typical translations of the Vedas, I had at least read this story. I said, but what is this? I mean, why is he coming in the way? Why Indra is coming in the way? Why is he blocking? Nothing is explained there. Nothing becomes clear. It's like just, he will just, like a stubborn king saying, no, I don't allow you. That's it. For whatever reason. So when you read this, you understand there is a whole chapter on Agastya and the colloquy between Agastya and Indra. This is again there in Secret of the Vedas. So there are some of the stories like Saraswati and the waters. So Saraswati is the goddess of learning, of speech, of inspiration, of revelation. So who are her sisters? So all these things we'll find in some of the stories which are given here. So this whole colloquy starts with a verse. It would seem by Indra, one of the most remarkable rigs in the whole Vedas. So this Indra in the Vedas is different from Indra is in the Puranas. You must understand. So Indra in the Vedas is the highest god. He is the one who has the global consciousness. Probably at the heights of the overmind he is sitting. So he has Sahasraksh. He can see everywhere. In the Puranas he is, brought down to another deity. The name is the same. But so he says, it is not now, not tomorrow, who knoweth that which is utterly wonderful. Its movement has for its field the knowledge of another, but when it is approached, it disappears. To this allocation, which might have come straight out of the deepest passages of the Upanishads, Agastya replies by complaint. So he says, who can speak of it? Who can reach it? It's wonderful beyond wonders. So Agastya says, why, O Indra? Wouldst thou slay us? The Maruts are thy brothers. With them do thou work for our perfections. Smite us not in a struggle. So if you really read through the stories in the Purana, so Indra is supposed to have actually, when Maruts were in the womb, so that's the time he sends his Vajra. And the Maruts split into 49 parts. So that's how we have the 49 Maruts. So if you read the story just as it is, look like a very crude story. What is Indra doing, slaying a child in the womb and is breaking into 49 parts. Now 49 is a very interesting figure because 49 and 49, and if you add 2 it makes 100 perfection. So what are these 49 Marut? They are 49, if you take the 7 planes, so 7 times 7. So they are the movements of Maruts are always, Vayu, that power which expresses itself through it's a power that expresses, it's the expressive vital. In human beings it is the speech. So what are these Maruts and why he wants them to go all around, not just only in one particular field. So Indra splits them in the womb, that otherwise no doubt it will be a formidable power, but it will not be all encompassing. So he doesn't slay or split the Maruts, he makes them manifold. So, but if you read the traditional translation, we see this is the kind of god that Indra is. So Agastya asks him, Indra defends himself, justifies the blows he has struck. Wherefore, O my brother Agastya, dost thou our comrade, think beyond us? Verily we know of thee, how to us thou willest not to give the offering of thy mind. Let them make the altar ready. Let them kindle utterly Agni in front. There is the awakening to immortality. Let us too extend thy sacrifice. Agastya yields and consents. Thou art the master, O Lord of substance, among the Vasus. Thou utterly disposest, O Lord of love, among the Mitras. Indra, do thou hold talk with the Maruts. Taste in the truth the offerings. So Sri Aurobindo says very interestingly, it seems to me that the sense of this little hymn, so beautiful, simple and profound in its expression and substance, is perfectly straightforward. We'll find it difficult to, if you just read the hymn, it'll be like, what is so? But this is the difference when a person has done the yoga. So he says, and only a preconceived theory or a perverse ingenuity can lead us astray. That which is neither now nor tomorrow. That's what Indra says. But beyond all time, the wonderful thing which no man can know, that which reveals itself by its activity in the consciousness of another, in ourselves, in Indra, in the Maruts, in every living being or active force. But if we seek to approach, study, and seize, it vanishes from our ken, is the Brahman. So he says that if you try to seize him and you say, I have it, I have found God, so he says that means you have fooled yourself. Because you cannot seize, you cannot possess him. It's like the moment you try to grasp by the mind, he vanishes. He can reveal himself to your mind. But if you try to grasp him by the mind through the mental understanding, it will vanish. But he can reveal, and he will reveal whatever he reveals. It reveals, she reveals, doesn't matter. Only that much you can know. So this is the first part where, Indra starts. No other conception of Indian thought fits this profound and subtle description. What sublime and numerous echoes wake in our memory as we repeat this mantra. There comes to us the solemn stanza of the Gita, Ashcharyavat Pashyati Kaschidenam. There come the words of the Mandukya Upanishad, Yachanta Trikalatitam. The solemn assertion of the Kena, Na Tatra Vaga Gacchati Namana. Its subtle distinction, Avigyatam Vijanatam Vigyatam Avijanatam. Vividly there comes the great fable of the mighty Yaksha who stood before the gods in the Ken Upanishad he is referring to, and who says that, catch me if you can, this is my... So, you can't catch him. You try to catch him, he vanishes. So there is the unknowable. The mind can pursue up to a point and will vanish. So that's where Indra comes to remind Agastya. Agastya, you are trying too much with the mind, it will vanish. So this is a stage in Agastya. But why does Indra cast this assertion of the unknowability of Brahman at Agastya in their quarrel? His self-justification in the third rik explains the motive. Agastya has been seeking to go beyond Indra in his thought consciousness. He has been seeking to exceed mind and arrive straight at Brahman. To place his mind and its activities not on the altar of the Lord of Mind, but on the altar of the unknown God. Not so, says Indra, shall thou attain. Through me, through the mind, through thy mental consciousness, thou shalt aspire to that which is wonderful. So, you see, this is very interesting in Zen Buddhism, for instance. You say that he is beyond mind. So, what do some people say? Drop the mind. That's not the path. Purify, refine, stretch it, take it to the utmost limits and lay it on the altar of the all wonderful. May all the thoughts strive to reach and lay it. So, it's a paradox. Thought cannot cease. But at the same time, it is by stretching the thought and laying it at the altar as a sacrifice to the one divine that he reveals himself to us. Because that's how the mind becomes ready to receive the infinite. So, this is how it is described. He perceives, Agast seeks to pacify Indra. He perceives that through the hostility of Indra, his mind refuses to work towards perfection, towards Siddhi in the yoga. In his strenuous struggling upward, it no longer helps but resists him. There is a divorce between his mental energies presided over by the Maruts and their great presiding and fulfilling Devata. Confusion, failure of thought, error, backsliding is the result. They went through all this, okay? So don't... Why wouldst thou slay me, he cries. I am but moving towards my goal. The Maruts are thy brothers, thoughts. Why art thou in disagreement with them? Rather with them as thy allies and helpers, do thy work of thinking in me in a way effective of my perfection. And strike me not down. The sense of Indra's reply is perfectly clear. We are brothers, O Agastya, sons of the same immortal being. We are friends and comrades. We have fought together the great Aryan battle against the fiends and giants and titans, the battle of the soul struggling towards immortality. But now you regard us as too little for you and seek to shoot beyond us. You think that, thought and thinking, there are people who speak of that, reason, all this has to be dropped. Thinking, just leave it because that is beyond. He says, you are trying that. So it's not the path of perfection. You can arrive at moksha through that, but not perfection. Perfection means you take the whole being together. So he says, you are thinking it's too small. We have seen how you are no longer willing to give the offering of your mind and its activities to us as of old. You are directing them elsewhere. This cannot be. You must not become the Adashush, and cease from the sacrifice decreed. Make ready the altar of the body and mind, kindle the fire of the divine force upon it in front of you. Let Agni stand as your Purohit. This is the way decreed. In the sacrifice to the right devatas and not otherwise, the soul of man awakens out of this death into that immortality. So it would practically mean that when the mind is brilliant and you divert it towards making money, I'm using now a very common, or if you divert it towards satisfying and fulfilling your ambitions, then he says this fellow is, there are people, you see, they go to Harvard universities and elsewhere and they want name and fame, wealth out of that brilliance of the mind. Is then the mind cannot develop that kind of, it cannot know the divine, know the Brahman. So you have to be one pointed. You have to let the Agni constantly move in front. And Agni moving in the front means the seeking to know more and more of the divine, for the sake of the divine, for the joy of the divine, for the service of the divine. Not like I want to know so that I can write, nice books on God. So that's not how one has to go. So he says, seek not to, this is the way decreed. Seek not to stand apart from me. Take my aid and let us two together extend the increasing sacrifice to its last fulfillment and culmination. Through mind fulfilled, go beyond mind to Brahman. Agastya, taught by experience, sees his error. He accepts the law of the sacrifice. Yes, he cries, I seek widened being. Thou among the lords of being art the chief master. Thou art master to give or deny. I seek infinite joy and love. Thou among the masters of love and joy art its most potent and liberal disposer. Come then into agreement with the Maruts and create the harmony of my thoughts. So basically it's like, supposing a mind is very narrow and small, practical terms, it is very rigid. It cannot realize the divine. You may have some experience and be lost in this. So the ways to make the mind plastic, supple, wide, immobile, this is exactly what the mother explains. That if you want the supramental truth to manifest through the mind, first make it wide. So she gives very simple exercises. But if you are rigid, dogmatic, all about thus alone and no, then you cannot realize it. You will be stopped. You may live in the illusion, some experience or something, and feel that you have got something. But if one really wants to arrive at the highest state of perfection, then you have to use the mind and the maruts, the thoughts, direct them toward the divine. Think of the divine, if you want to put it like mother's ways, and direct the thoughts toward the divine as an offering at the altar. And then joy, love, truth, all these will begin to manifest. So the Sri Aurobindo then says that the hymn throws a flood of light on the persistent tales of the Puranas and Itihas. And he closes with this: it is the powers of mind that seek to preserve their activity in the human being. I will understand only by analysis or by belief. He says they seek to preserve. And do not wish him, stilling these activities, to pass into the silent Brahman. In the Vedic ideal, Indra does not need to be an enemy. He is the best friend of the seeker. Because the ideal of the Vedic rishis is fulfillment and not cessation. So between the rational mind, analytical mind and the supramental, there are several layers through which various possibilities of inspiration, revelation, intuition, illumination, all these have to be awakened. That's why, Satyam, Ritam, Vrahatam, towards vastnesses. And then the mind becomes ready to really receive that light. Otherwise, mother says you are like a little point. Ego is like a little pinpoint. How will supermind find place? So this is what is described here. But still a time comes when the average Vedic yogin seeks to shoot by a shortcut beyond. So the term is spiritual bypassing. I want to just leave the world and bypass. World will not leave you so easily. So, especially when you come here, mother has made this is really the divine Tilasm Nagar. You can't, she's a magic builder. This place is built in such a way. You want to run away from the world, she'll say, okay, wait. It will come to you. Till you have really are ready to go beyond it. It will come. That challenge will keep coming. And you have to understand it's a challenge. You have to keep going inside, keep cultivating sincerity. From the practical point of view, this is what it means. So she says, an average Vedic yogin seeks to shoot by shortcut beyond, to dispense with tapasya and sacrifice and leap straight to the heights where all things are still. He is in danger of using the wrong means, following the wrong ideal. It is such a moment in his soul experience that Agastya records the attempt, the resistance of Indra, the strife, the salutary failure, the perception of failure, the reconciliation, submission, and recovered harmony. So that's why, when people write, let us say, poetry and all this, so it has this meaning because, through this the mind begins to expand, grow further into, it becomes more refined, subtlety. See, it's amazing in the ashram, so many people should be encouraged to write poetry. One would wonder why, what has poetry got to do? So I know of, certain spiritual movements who say, why is all this necessary? Ultimately you have to realize God, no. So why you need to go through all this? Then you will only probably enter into some impersonality. That's the path of annulment, but not fulfillment, because there is no base left. If that consciousness ever tries to express itself, it won't find a base that is ready. So now I'll probably, there I come. So then, like that, so this is just one little sample, but beautiful sample. So then there is, for instance, the word go. Nowadays we have so much about cow. India is a country which worships the cow, and now we have all kinds of stories, this side, that side, and of course cows are wonderful creatures. I personally believe that, you shouldn't kill cows. Look into the eyes of the cow. They're one of the most benign creatures who gives you so much in every way. How can you really kill? Your consciousness has to be very crude and cruel to really kill a cow. So, as such, to kill an animal for pleasure, at least I personally had rationally thought, why should I be a vegetarian? Though a vegetarian by birth, there is an age when you want to reason out everything. So myself and another friend of mine, so we used to discuss why should we not be non-vegetarian. So ultimately, yes, why should you kill an animal for your palate of pleasure? And we were in medical college, we were told that your hemoglobin, birth and protein, all this is all bakwas. So, and that's the time we went through and we decided. But cows, if you really look into cow, unlike the horse, unlike the buffalo, unlike the goat, unlike the rabbit, unlike all those other meats that people see, look into the cow, she really comes closest to the maternal feeling that is aroused when you feel. And nowadays cow hugging is coming in fashion. But that apart, it is not about all this, okay? So it's about the word go. So Sri Aurobindo says the word go in the Vedas appears to bear two ordinary meanings. So he takes up go, several little roots. All this he also discusses with much simpler and directness in Secret of the Vedas. So those who want to bypass, this was not really seen by Sri Aurobindo before publishing it, which I personally feel it's not a right thing to do, because he is the author. And just because I'm a custodian, I don't have the right to just just as we speak about copyrights. So copyrights to an author, this is part of that copyright. An author has not given permission. So one should respect that. This is how I believe. But nevertheless, so the word go in the Vedas appears to bear two ordinary meanings. First, cow. Secondly, ray, light or luster. In the hymns of Madhuchanda, it occurs 6 times in 5 hymns. It occurs twice in the 4th hymn addressed to Indra, in the first 3 verses. And all this he says. And then he comes to, obviously as a consequence to the result of the second verse which I translate, come to us, O bringer out of the nectar. Thou the Soma drinker, drink of the ecstatic Soma wine, a giver of illumination and rapture. Or in better English, bringing out the sense and association of the words, come to us, O thou who art a distiller of the nectar, thou the Soma drinker. Drink of the impetuously ecstatic Soma wine and be in the rapture of its intoxication, our giver of illuminating light. So he's speaking of wherever, the word cow has come. And then he goes at great lengths. The goddess is in the simile a milch cow. Indra is the milker. In each of the skies, the lower, middle, and higher, he calls to her and makes her bring out the beautiful forms which she reveals to the drinker of the Soma. But it is impossible when we take the connection with the two following verses to avoid seeing that he is taking advantage of the double sense of go. And that while in the simile, Indra is Goduha, the cow milker, in the subject of the comparison, he is Goduha, the bringer out of the illumination, the flashes of higher light which produce the beautiful forms by the power of the goddess. So you see now the word Gopala, it has a very different meaning. Goloka has a very different meaning. And from there comes Gupt, is that which is concealed. Why? Because light is concealed. So he is Gopala, he is the protector of the light, guardian of the light. And he is he milks the cow of plenty. And he is the Dogdha. That's how Krishna is described. That he has milked the Upanishads and given us the Gita. So this is how the word go means. The forms are those beautiful and myriad images of things in all the three worlds. The three Akash. The passage describes the condition in which the mind, whether by drinking the material wine or, as I hold, by feeding on the internal Amrita, is raised to its highest exalted condition before it is taken up into Mahas or Karanam. So this is how the whole illumination, and then it begins to grow into its fullness. And one of these things which consistently comes throughout the writing, the sign that you are in a state of a higher inspiration and you are receiving those rays, there is simultaneously a delight. So you see the difference between a typical scholarly approach to all these things and when it is the result of an illumination and inner inspiration. It invariably brings joy because they come together. So, and then this about the go. Sri Aurobindo says something very interesting about with a touch of humor. But in the last century, a new scholarship has invaded the country. The scholarship of aggressive and victorious Europe, which for the first time denies the intimate connection and the substantial identity of the Vedas and the later scriptures. We ourselves have made distinctions of Gyan Kand and Karm Kand, Shruti and Smriti, but we have never doubted that all these are branches of a single stock. But our new Western Pandits and authorities tell us that we are in error. All of us, from ancient Yagnavalk to the modern Vedika, have been making a huge millennial mistake. European scholarship applying for the first time the test of a correct philology to these obscure writings has corrected the mistake. Mark the humor. Okay, sure. They have corrected the mistake. After all, we didn't know our own language. It is discovered that the Vedas are of an entirely different character from the rest of our Hindu development. For a development has been pantheistic or transcendental, philosophical, mystic, devotional, somber, secretive, centered in the giant names of the Indian Trinity, disengaging itself from sacrifice, moving towards asceticism. The Vedas are naturalistic, realistic, ritualistic, semi-barbarous, a sacrificial worship of material nature powers, henotheistic at their highest, pagan, joyous and self-indulgent. Brahma and Shiva do not exist for the Vedas. Vishnu and Rudra are minor, younger and unimportant deities. Many more discoveries of a startling nature, but now familiar to the most ignorant, have been successfully imposed on our intellects. The Vedas, it seems, were not revealed to a great and ancient rishis, but composed by the priests of a small invading Aryan race of agriculturists and warriors, akin to the Greeks and Persians who encamped some 15,000 years before Christ in the Punjab. So, that's how it starts. And after that, you have heard a word, dhobi pachad. When wrestlers, dulai, Because he's a master in philology and he has got the experience. So after that, when he starts, this is still, but Shubindu is a gentleman. Even in his Dhobi Pachad, he's like very friendly and makes you feel, see, I have put you on the ground. Okay, it doesn't matter, get up, let's see from another angle. See from this angle. Okay, come. Again. But you will see it much more in Secret of the Vedas. Here also you will see it, but and then he speaks of the what really is Vedic religion and what are the Vyahritis, what is the Maharlok. All this he gives about 15 different aspects of the Vedic religion. I'll not go into it because, as I said, we'll see the upgraded version, the final ones, which in Secret of the Vedas and Hymns to Mystic Fire, which will come. Then the most important, interesting part is where at the end he speaks about the origins of Aryan speech. Now, Sanskrit is a very fascinating language. We all know it, and it makes use of every possibility of sound. And Sri Aurobindo literally has written a, I, E, O, E, A, O, and each of the root what it signifies. And what is the deity behind it? Vishnu. Like that he has written. And he has gone to the roots. Ma. Ma means so many things. For instance, to measure. But you see, Ma also Yama. So sounds very interesting. Ma is the one who measures out. So she turns the infinite into finite. So she is Maya. But she is also Yama. So she restrains, measures. From the same root, life comes and death comes. So it doesn't, Yama, what does Yama do? He restrains. He will not allow you to go beyond a point. So again he measures out. So it's very interesting when he speaks about this, a whole chapter on the word Ma. How it's, and every letter, every syllable, he has marked out and all, how with the touching of the tongue with the palate, how with the nose coming in, how the cerebral, aspect coming into speech. And then when you look at our own language, it's so fascinating. No language has this richness, this possibility and this diversity. And then he compares it with Tamil. So all this Aryan, Dravidian divide, which has been a creation purely out of pure political gains, it just collapses because he has philology to back it up. Now, of course, genetic DNA and everything has proved that this was a myth which was created. That Sri Aurobindo speaks of much more in Secret of the Vedas. So we'll talk about it when we come there. Let me just close with the last part of... He has a chapter in this on the Vedic gods. Who are the Vedic gods and what each of them stands for. So the gods are at once beings, cosmic beings, who are given the task of cosmic management. But they are also the psychological movement which are inspired by them. So the whole concept of gods being outside us, it changes into gods as the gods build up within us the state of divinity through our psychological movements. Who are the Asuras and Rakshasas? They are beings who are outside us. They have their own world, but they also act upon us to distort, to divert, to, the other day we were reading in Savitri, diverts the messages of the infallible word. So when we look at it from that point of view, we begin to become conscious of our own psychology. What are the movements in which the gods are acting? And what are the movements in which gods as aspects and powers of the divine? What are the movements in which Asuras and Rakshasas are acting? And then you discover something very interesting about human movements. There are movements which seem very nice outwardly, but deep within they are divisive. Very interesting. And there are movements which may look on the surface as if this is divisive, but it is going to build unity and harmony. So when we start looking behind what is inspiring us, that's where we have the secret of the action of the gods and the titans and the battle that goes on within us. So these two last bit I'll read. The Veda proper is Karm Kand, not Gyan Kand. People what does it mean? So he reveals its aim is not moksha but divine fulfillment. This is what the Vedic rishis were seeking. In this life and the next, therefore the Vedic rishis accepted plenty and fullness of physical, vital and mental being, power and joy as the pratishtha or foundation of immortality, and did not reject it as an obstacle to salvation. Of course, they spoke about freedom from ignorance. That's the fundamental thing. To realize the divine being is the fundamental thing. But it was not as a doorway to moksha. So they accepted plenty. And when we look at the Indian civilization that was built around it, far from ascetics, all the Vedic rishis. Now we of course show them as wearing dhoti with a dadi and moving with a kamandali. But they were rishis who had weapons, celestial weapons, who had Kamadhenu. Even the king's Kshatriya king Vishwamitra says, what is this arrangement that you have? That you can feed thousands in the army just like that. So these were the powers they wielded. Powers of mind, vital, life, physical, because they were seeking for fulfillment. The world being one in all its parts, every being in it contains the universe in himself. Especially do the great gods contain all the others and their activities in themselves. So too, Agni, Varun, Indra, all of them are in reality one sole existent deity in many forms. So he combines the pantheistic view with the sense of one divine. Man too is he with a capital H, but he has to fulfill himself here as man, yet divine. That being is Vrat and Dharma through the Puja means provided for him by the Veda. So this is our goal. And Sri Aurobindo says that in our true, mother uses the word true domicile, she belongs to a very high region from the overmind. In the Vedas it is said man comes from Swarlok, which is just before the supramental Mahas. So we have come here for a work, and that work is not running away from here. We shouldn't have come here. That work is to work towards a divine creation, a divine manifestation, both in the individual and in the world, a divine fulfillment of the race. Namaste.